if you think about it, there's certain movies out there that don't have either an antagonist or a villain. Now, in regards to what exactly the difference is, I would say that a villainous character does more extreme things, whereas an antagonistic character does not. I'm going to go more into this in a different video, but for now, the one big example that comes to mind is Inside Out. If you think about it, there is not a single character in that movie that's working against our good guys. There's no antagonistic or villainous figure in that movie whatsoever. I mean, the enemy really is just this idea of depression, not a single person being nothing like that. Also, think about Frozen 2 for a second. The first film has a surprise villain in Prince Hans, but you look at Frozen 2 and it doesn't have that. There's a character who we learn was villainous, but he's not alive anymore. So he's not an antagonist or villain. It's just we get this reveal about Arendelle's past. And I mean, you have these elemental spirits that temporarily drive the people of Arendelle away from Arendelle. They're not the villains. So with Frozen 2, there's no one who's an antagonistic or villainous figure at all. Also, think about the classic comedy Mrs. Doubtfire. I mean, with Dumb and Dumber, there are definitely bad guys, but with Mrs. Doubtfire, I mean, there's not a clear-cut bad guy. You have a main character that is flawed. We definitely see him commit crimes in the movie, but we also see he has good qualities as well, so he's not really a villain. And then you have Pierce Brosnan's character, Stu. Initially, his character was scripted to be more of a douchebag, but then the people who made Mrs. Doubtfire decided to change it to make you think, oh, he's actually a legitimately good guy with no nefarious motives at all. He would actually be a good father figure for the kids. So there's no one in that movie who is either antagonistic, working against, or heroes are trying to do, or villainous, because he does more extreme things. Also, think about the movie Elf, another classic comedy. I mean, in that case, you have a character Walter, who starts off as more cold. He doesn't care much for Buddy at first, but then that changes as the movie goes on. At the beginning, he's kind of a jerk, but you still don't feel like he's an antagonist. He's just a guy with flaws who unfortunately is too preoccupied with his work, so his family finds him a bit hard to deal with, because especially his son thinks that he's just a stern, cold business guy that doesn't care about them. But then by the end of the movie, Walter shows that he actually does care about his family. And you have a character, Miles Finch, who for one scene for just a little bit shows up. He's kind of a jerk, but still, he's not really the antagonist or villain of the movie. You can understand why he would get annoyed with what Buddy's doing. We know that Buddy means no harm at all. He's a good guy who doesn't have a single nefarious bone in his whole body, but from Miles Finch's standpoint, you can understand why he'd be annoyed. Also, think about Forrest Gump. There's no character in this movie who is an antagonist or a villain. I mean, you have a character who maybe doesn't initially like Forrest Gump, but then grows to like him. The way the movie is structured, you have Forrest Gump telling all these stories while he's just sitting down at a bench. So in the present, Forrest Gump is just telling a story to anyone who will listen. We see his life story, what happened to him in the past. That movie lacks any kind of antagonistic or villainous figure at all.